I became a vampire on a Tuesday. Not during some moonlit ritual in a gothic castle, but in a Chicago parking garage while checking my phone. The attacker came from behind. I remember the pressure on my neck, the odd metallic taste flooding my mouth, then nothing. 3 days later, I woke up in my apartment with messages piling up about missed meetings and a hunger that made my previous worst hangover feel like a minor inconvenience. That was 2019. 5 years ago now. And if you're expecting some romantic tale about immortal longing or tragic eternal love, let me stop you right there. Modern vampirism is mostly about dealing with bureaucracy, figuring out ethical blood sourcing, and trying to maintain a credit score when you technically don't exist anymore. The transformation itself rewrites you at a cellular level. My reflection didn't vanish, that's medieval nonsense, but my circadian rhythm inverted completely within 72 hours. Sunlight became physically painful, like touching a hot stove with your entire body simultaneously. Not instantly fatal, despite what the movies promise, but agonizing enough that you learn quickly. I made the mistake of stepping outside at noon exactly once. The burns healed in about 6 hours, leaving no scars but plenty of motivation to invest in blackout curtains. What they never tell you in the stories is how vampirism affects your senses first. Everything becomes overwhelming. I could hear my neighbour's heartbeat through 2 walls, the smell of a stranger's blood type from across a subway car. The fluorescent lights in my office, the ones I'd never noticed before, suddenly buzzed with the intensity of a chainsaw. I called in sick for 2 weeks straight while my brain adjusted to processing sensory input that would have hospitalised a normal human. The hunger is real, but it's not what you'd expect. It doesn't feel like starvation, more like missing a crucial vitamin your body suddenly requires to function. You can ignore it for a while, push through with willpower, but eventually you'll make mistakes. I know a vampire in Seattle who tried going cold turkey, convinced he could sustain himself on animal blood and pure determination. He lasted 9 days before he lost control at a crowded farmer's market. 43 people needed therapy. 7 needed hospitalization. He needed a new identity and a one-way ticket to Alaska. Finding ethically sourced blood in the 21st century is easier than you'd think, but harder than it should be. Blood banks won't sell to individuals, obviously, but there's a grey market. Hospitals dispose of expired donations. Plasma centres have wastage. You learn to network. There's an app now, I'm serious, called Crimson Circle. Looks like a normal social networking platform on the surface. You'd never know it connects vampires with willing donors unless you knew the specific verification process to unlock the real features. Donors are their own interesting subset of humanity. Some do it for money. The going rate is about $200 per pint, significantly more than legal plasma donation. Others are what we call fang chasers, people with a vampire fetish who get something psychological out of the experience. Then there's the smallest group, the ones I actually prefer, people who view it as a form of mutual aid. They have something we need to survive. We provide compensation or services in return. Simple transaction between consenting adults. My regular donor is a graduate student named Marcus who uses the money for tuition. We meet every 2 weeks at a neutral location, usually a hotel room he books. The process takes about 30 minutes, including paperwork. Yes, paperwork. Consent forms, health declarations, liability waivers. Modern vampirism runs on documentation. Marcus studies while I feed, usually reading dense philosophy texts that make my head hurt worse than sunlight. He says the slight lightheadedness afterward helps him retain information better. I don't ask questions. The feeding itself is nothing like the movies portray. No passionate neck-biting or erotic undertones, at least not in my transactions. I use a sterile needle and collection bag, same equipment as a blood drive. The only difference is what happens afterward. I can drink it fresh or store it. Fresh is better, the vitality degrades after about 48 hours even with refrigeration, but you learn to plan ahead. My freezer looks like a blood bank's backup storage. Visitors find it disturbing. I've stopped having visitors. Work became complicated immediately. I was a corporate accountant before the change. Regular 9 to 5 schedule, occasional overtime during tax season. Suddenly, I needed to restructure my entire professional life around nocturnal existence. I told my boss I'd developed a severe photosensitivity disorder, which wasn't technically a lie, and requested permanent remote work with flexible hours. This was pre-pandemic, so the request raised eyebrows. I had to get a doctor's note. Finding a vampire-friendly physician took 3 weeks and cost me $4,000 in under-the-table fees. Dr. Sarah Chen runs a clinic in Chinatown that caters specifically to what she calls alternative biology patients. Vampires primarily, but she's also treated werewolves and one very nervous demon who'd gotten stuck mid-transformation. She writes the prescriptions we need for legal cover, provides medical care when our unique physiology requires it, and maintains records that satisfy insurance companies without revealing anything actionable. Her waiting room has special UV-filtered lighting and appointments available at 3 a.m. She charges triple the normal rates and worth every penny. The financial reality of vampirism shocked me more than the physical changes. Your expenses don't decrease when you stop eating normal food. They shift. Blood costs money. UV protective clothing costs money. Relocating to a basement apartment costs money. Bribes to keep your condition quiet costs serious money. I burned through my savings in 8 months. That's when I discovered the vampire economy. We have our own financial networks, investment groups, mutual aid societies. Makes sense when you think about it. A vampire who became immortal in 1823 has had 2 centuries to accumulate wealth and compound interest. The really old ones, the ones who've been around since the Renaissance or earlier, they're essentially walking hedge funds. They invest in everything, manipulate markets with insider knowledge that spans decades, and fund younger vampires through what amounts to an eternal patronage system. I got connected through a vampire named Elizabeth who'd been turned during the Civil War. She runs a venture capital firm that exclusively backs vampire-owned businesses. Her portfolio includes a national chain of 24-hour gyms, several pharmaceutical companies researching synthetic blood alternatives, and a significant stake in blackout curtain manufacturing. She fronted me $50,000 at 0 interest to stabilize my situation. The only condition was that I pay it forward once I'd established myself. That loan saved my existence. I paid off my immediate debts, invested in better living arrangements, and started consulting for other vampires who needed financial planning. Turns out, immortality doesn't automatically grant fiscal responsibility. I've met vampires who've been alive for 300 years and still don't understand retirement accounts. But here's what nobody warns you about when you're freshly turned and trying to navigate this new existence. The isolation isn't about being a monster, it's about the fundamental disconnect between your timeline and everyone else's. Human relationships operate on assumptions of shared mortality. People make plans assuming they'll age together, die together, share a limited span of years. When you're removed from that equation, when you're suddenly looking at centuries instead of decades, every interaction carries a weight that humans can't comprehend. I started dating someone 6 months after my transformation, Jennifer. We met at a networking event I forced myself to attend back when I still thought I could maintain a normal professional life. She worked in marketing, had this infectious laugh, collected vintage typewriters. We clicked immediately. I didn't tell her what I was. Obviously, you don't lead with that on a first date or a 5th date. Or a 20th. I kept pushing the revelation further into the future, telling myself I'd find the right moment. Meanwhile, I constructed an elaborate web of lies to explain my limitations. Why I could only meet after dark. Why I never ate in front of her. Why my apartment had blackout curtains thick enough to stop a nuclear blast. She thought I was quirky, eccentric, maybe a little obsessive about my sleep schedule. For 3 months, it worked. We'd meet for late dinners where I'd push food around my plate, see midnight movie showings, take walks through the city at 2 a.m. when the streets belonged to us and the occasional drunk. She said she loved my spontaneity, my willingness to embrace the night. If only she'd known it wasn't a choice. The relationship ended on a Tuesday. We'd planned a weekend trip to her family's cabin upstate. I'd been dreading it for weeks because I couldn't figure out how to explain why I needed to sleep during the entire day, why I couldn't join them for morning hikes or afternoon swimming. I'd concocted a story about a work emergency, something urgent that required my immediate return to the city. But Jennifer surprised me the night before we were supposed to leave. Showed up at my apartment at 11 p.m. with a bottle of wine and a confession. She'd been offered a job in Seattle. Amazing opportunity, significant pay increase, everything she'd been working toward. She wanted me to come with her. I looked at her standing in my doorway, eyes bright with excitement and hope, and I realized I had exactly two choices. Tell her the truth about what I was and watch her face transform from love to horror. Or let her go, let her build a life with someone who could actually share daylight with her. I chose option 2, told her I couldn't leave New York, that my life was here, that long distance wouldn't work. Watched her process the rejection in real time, the confusion, the hurt, the anger. She left crying, blocked my number that same night. Elizabeth found me 3 days later, still sitting in the dark, still replaying the conversation. She didn't offer sympathy. Just sat down across from me and started talking. "You're going to do this approximately 40 more times over the next century," she said. Her voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd lived through it. "You'll fall in love with humans who age while you don't. You'll watch them develop wrinkles, grey hair, the subtle physical deterioration that comes with mortality, and you'll stay exactly as you are right now, 29 forever." She was right, of course, but knowing it intellectually and experiencing it are completely different things. The vampire community has complex unwritten rules about human relationships. Some of the older vampires refuse to engage with humans romantically at all. They form partnerships exclusively with other vampires, relationships that can actually last centuries without the complications of differential aging. Others take the opposite approach, engaging in brief, intense affairs with humans precisely because they know they're temporary. Get in, experience the connection, get out before the mortality gap becomes obvious. I tried both approaches, neither felt right. The vampire relationships lacked something essential. When you're both immortal, there's no urgency, no precious quality to your time together. Everything can be postponed indefinitely. We'll visit Paris next decade. We'll have that conversation in 50 years. The infinite timeline drains meaning from the present moment. But the human relationships were worse. Every birthday they celebrated was a reminder of what I'd lost. Every grey hair, every complaint about aging joints, every moment they spent planning for retirement while I planned for my next century. The gap wasn't just physical, it was philosophical. Here's what really breaks you, though. The realization that you're going to outlive everyone you've ever known. Your parents will die, your siblings, your friends from college, your co-workers, that neighbor who always says hello in the hallway. Every single human connection you form comes with an expiration date that you can see clearly, and they can't. I watched my father die when I was 42 years into my vampirism. He was 79. I was still 29. He didn't know what I'd become. I'd maintained the charade for over 4 decades, showing up for holidays with increasingly elaborate excuses about why I looked exactly the same as I had in my 20s. Good genes, I'd say. Expensive moisturizer, lots of sunscreen. He died believing his son had somehow discovered the fountain of youth through skincare. Never knew he was saying goodbye to something that used to be human. My mother figured it out, though. 3 years before she died, she cornered me at what would be our last Thanksgiving together. Everyone else had gone to bed. Just the two of us in her kitchen at 1 a.m., her arthritic hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "You're not aging," she said. Not a question, a statement. I could have denied it. Should have. Instead, I just nodded. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "Are you happy?" I didn't know how to answer that. Happiness is a human concept tied to human timeframes. You're happy when good things happen, sad when bad things happen, but it all balances out over the course of a normal lifetime. When that lifetime stretches toward infinity, emotions lose their peaks and valleys. Everything flattens into a kind of persistent, low-grade okayness. "I'm surviving," I finally said. She reached across the table and took my hand. Hers felt papery, fragile, like it might crumble under the slightest pressure. Mine felt exactly as it had 30 years earlier. "That's not the same thing," she said. She died in her sleep 14 months later. I inherited her house, her savings, her collection of ceramic birds. I sold everything except one bird, a small blue jay she'd kept on her kitchen windowsill. It sits on my desk now, this fragile piece of painted porcelain, a reminder that everything beautiful is temporary, except me. I'm the opposite of temporary. I'm the permanence that watches temporary things disappear. The years started blending together around the century mark. Not because my memory was failing. Vampire memory is perfect, crystalline, every moment preserved in exact detail. That's actually the problem. When you can remember everything with equal clarity, nothing stands out. Tuesday in 1987 feels identical to Thursday in 2003. Same conversations, different faces. Same problems, different decades. I tried keeping journals to mark the passage of time, to create some artificial sense of progression. Lasted about 30 years before I realised I was just documenting variations on the same themes. Met someone interesting, they aged. I didn't. We drifted apart, tried a new city, same problems, different skyline, found a hobby, mastered it, got bored, repeat. The internet changed things for a while. Finally, a way to connect with people without them noticing. I never aged. Online, everyone's eternally 29 if they want to be. I could maintain friendships for years through screens and text, never having to explain why I looked identical to my profile picture from 2008, until video calls became standard. Back to the same old problem. I've lived in 43 cities across 6 continents. You'd think that kind of variety would keep things fresh. It doesn't. Cities are just different arrangements of the same fundamental components. Buildings, roads, people who wake up and go to work and come home and sleep. The architecture changes. Human behaviour doesn't. Tokyo was interesting for about 15 years. Then it was just another place where I didn't belong. Same with Mumbai, Cape Town, Sao Paulo. Geographic change is just cosmetic when the real issue is temporal. I'm living on a different timeline than everyone around me. We're occupying the same space but moving at fundamentally incompatible speeds. You know what I miss most about being human? The ability to be surprised. When you've seen enough patterns repeat, you start predicting everything. Relationships follow predictable arcs. Political movements echo previous movements. Technologies change, but human responses to those technologies remain remarkably consistent. People made the same arguments about the printing press that they made about television, that they now make about social media. Same fear, different medium. I can predict with unsettling accuracy how most conversations will unfold before they start. Not because I am particularly clever, just because I've had versions of this conversation hundreds of times before. The specific words change. The underlying patterns don't. Here's something nobody tells you about immortality. It doesn't make you wise. Wisdom requires learning from mistakes, and learning requires stakes. When you can't die, when you have infinite time to correct errors, mistakes lose their teaching power. I've made the same stupid decisions in different centuries because there's never been a compelling reason to change. Fell in love with mortals, knowing how it would end. Did it anyway, started businesses that would collapse within decades, kept doing it, formed friendships I knew were temporary, couldn't stop myself. The pattern recognition doesn't prevent the pattern. It just makes you aware you're repeating it. I tried therapy once in the 90s, lasted 3 sessions before the therapist started noticing inconsistencies in my timeline. Hard to maintain a coherent life story when your actual history spans multiple normal lifetimes. I'd slip up, reference events that happened when I was younger that predated her grandparents. She started looking at me differently, concerned, confused. I stopped going. The vampire community isn't much help. Most of them are either ancient enough to have completely lost touch with humanity, or recent enough to still be intoxicated by their power. The ancient ones speak in riddles and metaphors, their thought patterns so divorced from human experience that conversations feel like talking to alien intelligence. The young ones are insufferable. All that energy and enthusiasm about their newfound abilities. Give them a few centuries, they'll understand. There's a middle group, though. Vampires like me who've been around long enough to see the pattern, but not so long that we've forgotten what it feels like to be human. We recognize each other instantly. That particular brand of tired that comes from watching civilizations rise and fall while you stay exactly the same. We don't talk much when we meet. What's there to say? We already know. Instead, we sit in comfortable silence. Two permanent fixtures in a temporary world, both wondering if this ever gets easier. It doesn't. I thought technology would fix some of this. Digital immortality, they called it. Upload your consciousness, live forever in virtual space. I watched that movement with interest, wondering if it might offer some kind of companionship. Finally, people who existed on my timeline. Turns out digital immortality has the same problem as biological immortality. Infinite time, finite novelty. The early uploads were ecstatic for the first few decades, then the reports started coming back through their representatives. Boredom. Profound, existential boredom. Existence without the possibility of non-existence loses something essential. Several of them requested deletion, actual death, after achieving immortality. That told me everything I needed to know. I've started noticing something disturbing lately. My emotional range is narrowing, not because I'm becoming cold or cruel, just because emotions require contrast to function properly. Joy means something when you've experienced sorrow. Relief makes sense after anxiety. But when you've experienced every variation of every emotion across multiple lifetimes, they start losing their distinction. Everything becomes this mild, persistent okayness I mentioned to my mother. Not happy, not sad, just existing in this perpetual state of emotional room temperature. Sometimes I'll try to force a feeling, watch a sad movie and will myself to cry, listen to beautiful music and demand that I feel moved. It works occasionally, like muscle memory, but it's becoming harder. The emotions feel performed rather than genuine. I'm going through the motions of feelings I remember having, but can't quite access anymore. That scares me more than anything else. Not the immortality itself, the gradual erosion of what made existence meaningful in the first place. I've been thinking about my mother's question a lot lately. Are you happy? I gave her a non-answer because I didn't understand what she was really asking. She wasn't asking about my emotional state. She was asking if immortality was worth the cost. I'm starting to suspect it isn't. The vampires who turned me made it sound like a gift. Eternal life, unlimited time to learn, experience, grow. They weren't lying exactly. You do get all that. What they don't mention is that unlimited time eventually makes everything meaningless. The human experience derives value from scarcity. Limited time forces prioritization, creates urgency, makes moments precious. Remove that limitation and you remove the framework that gives life structure. I've been doing this for 147 years now. Some of the ancient vampires I've met have been doing it for millennia. I'm starting to understand why so many of them seem so empty. They're not experiencing eternity. They're enduring it. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if I'd said no that night. If I'd run when the vampire approached me instead of staying to listen. Would I have lived a normal human lifespan? Probably not a great one given where I was at the time, but it would have ended. That's the thing nobody tells you about immortality. The ending is the point. Death gives shape to life the way a frame gives shape to a painting. Without it, everything just bleeds together into an endless canvas of undifferentiated time. There are moments when I consider ending it myself. Vampires can die. We're hard to kill, but not impossible. Sunlight works, though it's slower than the movies suggest. Decapitation is efficient. Fire is unpleasant but effective. I've stood at the edge of that decision several times over the years. What stops me isn't hope or curiosity about what comes next. It's something smaller and more pathetic. Habit. I've been existing for so long that continuing requires less energy than stopping. It's easier to keep going through familiar motions than to take the active step of ending it all. My mother died 3 years ago. I was there, holding her hand as her breathing slowed and stopped. She was 92. She'd lived a full life, she told me near the end. She'd loved and been loved. She'd created things. She'd experienced enough. She was ready. I envied her so completely in that moment, it physically hurt. She got to be done. She got to reach a natural conclusion. Her story had a beginning, middle, and end. Mine just had as a beginning and then this endless, meandering middle section that goes nowhere and resolves nothing. I've started making a list of things I genuinely enjoy. Not things I used to enjoy or things I remember enjoying. Things that still produce something resembling authentic pleasure. The list is shorter than I'd like. Thunderstorms, the smell of old books, certain pieces of music, though fewer every year, conversations with the other old vampires even though they're depressing. That's about it. Everything else is just killing time. Which is ironic since time is the one thing I can't actually kill. The younger vampires don't understand yet. They're still in the phase where immortality feels like a superpower. They talk about all the things they're going to do, all the skills they're going to master, all the places they're going to see. I don't correct them. They'll figure it out on their own eventually. Usually takes about 50 years before the reality starts settling in. I've been thinking about purpose lately. Humans derive purpose from their mortality. They have limited time, so they choose how to spend it. Those choices create meaning. But when you have unlimited time, choice becomes paradoxically meaningless. You can do everything eventually, so doing any particular thing right now loses significance. Some immortals try to create artificial purpose. They set goals, pursue projects, dedicate themselves to causes. I've tried that. It works for a while. Then you complete the goal, or the project ends, or the cause you dedicated yourself to becomes irrelevant. A society shifts around it, and you're back where you started, existing in this purposeless drift through endless time. The humans have started talking about life extension more seriously in recent years. Medical advances, genetic modifications, potential paths to significantly extended lifespans, maybe even immortality for everyone, not just vampires. Part of me wants to warn them, to explain what they're actually asking for. But I know they won't listen. I wouldn't have listened either at 23. You have to experience it to understand it. The way unlimited time slowly drains meaning from existence. The way eternal life gradually becomes eternal tedium. The way immortality transforms from blessing to burden so gradually you don't notice until you're already trapped. I met a vampire last month who'd been turned in the 15th century. 600 years of existence. We sat in a quiet bar, two ancient things surrounded by humans living their brief, intense lives. I asked him if it ever got better, if you ever adjusted to the endlessness of it all. He thought about it for a long time before answering. Then he said something I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He said the first 100 years, you're still human. You're just a human who doesn't age. The second 100 years, you start becoming something else. Not better or worse, just different. After that, he said, you're not really anything anymore. You're just a consciousness observing time pass. A witness to history with no stake in its outcome. I am somewhere in that transition now, still human enough to remember what meaning felt like. Far enough removed that I can't quite access it anymore, caught between two states belonging fully to neither. Sometimes I'll see a human couple, elderly, walking slowly together, and I'll feel this crushing weight of loss for something I never had and never will. They get to grow old together. They get to share that journey toward an ending. Their love story has an arc. Mine just has a starting point and then an endless flat line stretching toward infinity. I've stopped making long-term plans. What's the point? Everything is long-term when you're immortal. Instead, I've started focusing on moments, individual experiences that might produce something resembling genuine feeling. It's not much, but it's something. A way to create small pockets of meaning in the vast emptiness of unlimited time. The thunderstorm last Tuesday was good. Really good. I stood outside for 2 hours, letting the rain soak through my clothes, watching lightning split the sky. For those 2 hours, I felt something close to alive. Not happy exactly, but present. Engaged with the immediate experience rather than drifting through it half aware. Those moments are becoming rarer. I'm trying to hold on to them when they come, to extract whatever meaning I can before they fade back into the general monotony of existence. It's not the immortal life I imagined at 23, but it's what I have. An eternity of searching for brief moments of authentic experience in an endless expanse of time. My mother asked if I was happy. The answer is no, I'm not happy, but I'm also not unhappy. I'm just here, existing, watching, waiting for the next thunderstorm. I don't know what comes after this. Another century of watching the world change while I stay the same. Another 1,000 thunderstorms collected like desperate gasps of feeling. More people I'll care about who'll age and die while I remain frozen at 29. The vampires who turned me are long gone now, destroyed themselves in the 1950s, from what I heard. Maybe they figured out what I'm still learning, that immortality isn't sustainable, not psychologically, not emotionally. You can maintain the biology indefinitely, but the mind wasn't built for this kind of duration. I think about Jennifer sometimes. She'd be in her 60s now if she's still alive. Probably has grandchildren. A full life with its natural rhythms and transitions and eventual conclusion. Everything I gave up that night in the parking garage. The humans will keep pursuing life extension. Keep chasing immortality like it's the ultimate achievement. And maybe for them it will be different. Maybe collective immortality solves the isolation problem. Maybe having everyone exist on the same infinite timeline creates new frameworks for meaning. But I doubt it. The value isn't in the length, it's in the limitation. My mother understood that at 92 better than I understand it at 147. She got to be done. I just get to keep going.